Welcome to episode 48 of the Catholic Frequency Podcast. Today, we talk to Jacob from the X social media account Catholicism in East Asia. A very fascinating account with almost 30,000 followers. And we start off our conversation by asking him, what made you want to get on the social media platform X and start posting about the faith in this part of the world?
Really, this was a long-standing interest of mine. And what really struck me was there was no account that was doing essentially what I was doing. There have been accounts, larger Catholic accounts, that do post about, let's say, like a Catholic piece of art from Japan or China or a church or something along those lines. But there was a sort of absence in that in that niche, which I wanted to fill. But I have to give a big shout out to one specific account, Indo Christian culture. They are not a exclusively Catholic account, but they do include Catholic content. They really inspired me with the idea to have just like an account dedicated to posting about this topic. And they did help me in my very early days to get sort of like a jump start. So I'm very grateful to them for the idea and for the very beginnings of the account.
What is your favorite thing to post on this account? Is it like historical stories, like some of the martyrs? Is it just the artwork from the different cultures? What do you like to share the most?
I think my favorite thing to post is, honestly, I do like the artwork, and I know that people do also very much enjoy the artwork. But I get the most, I guess, satisfaction out of posting about just like more in-depth stories about the church in Asia, because it is a criminally undercovered subject, and a lot of really incredible stories are just out there, and most Catholics aren't aware. Like I'm currently reading through the journals of Matteo Ricci, Jesuit priest, Italian Jesuit priest, who sort of pioneered the mission in China back in the late 1500s, and every single page is filled with so much fascinating information. So I really do enjoy those posts where I get to dig into that sort of stuff. Yeah.
So when your account's about East Asia, so we're talking about China, Japan. What other countries would fall into that sphere of being East Asia versus a little further west?
The countries that I just like take this very specific definition of East Asia in order to not overextend myself, because there's so much information about Catholicism in Vietnam and in the Philippines. But I limit myself to what's conventionally considered East Asia, which is mostly just China, Korea, Japan, Tibet, and Mongolia. So sort of, I guess an alternative term for it would be Northeast Asia, but that is generally the area of focus for me.
Now you have a website, right? Church in Asia. And what's the mission of the website? How is that different than what you're doing on X?
The website is sort of supplementary. The purpose of it is because, X or Twitter, or whatever you want to call it, it's a very specific format. It's it's tweets, which are usually short form, and you know, sometimes there's threads, but it is very very flashy, it catches your attention quickly. And there's some resources that I have that really don't fit onto Twitter. Just like sharing websites or like academic articles or pages that I think are relevant if you do want to research this for yourself. There's also it's something that I'm working on. You know, I've been rather busy the past couple of years with like schoolwork, but the idea was to also host a bunch of images of churches and statues and holy images on the website. And that's something that I've done a little bit of, but that is something that I in the future would like to host more. Ideally, at some point, I would like to host my own photographs when I get the opportunity to take them. But also the other function of the website is, and you know, I'm not a person who you know pushes this very hard, but part of the function is to have sort of like a place you can, oh right, a place where you can both buy the books that I'm putting back into print, and also a place where you can read those books for free.
You mentioned that the church in Asia is, I think you said, criminally underreported. Why do you think that is?
I think it's principally because, well, I need to make something clear in the sense that I'm mostly talking about English language sources, because I am currently studying Japanese, but I do not have nearly good enough proficiency in that to read academic sources. So in the English sphere, it's just, I think the reason why it's underreported is because it's a combination of both Catholics not really being aware of the situation in East Asia. A lot of Catholic express, you know, surprise that there are any Christians at all in some of these countries. And a secondary factor would be that if you just look like at the demographics of historians, these are people who generally, not all of them, but hold certain views and certain interests. And, you know, with an increasingly secular world, unfortunately, there's a lot less interest in these types of topics as opposed to, you know, a couple hundred years ago, where this was a very central, very important part of academia.
I think too, just for the general public, you know, Americans, you know, there's not a lot of news on American television about what's going on around the world in many countries. It's just we're kind of focused inward a lot of times. I think you're right that most Catholics are unaware of this rich history. If you had the chance, let's just say you went to some parish, you know, dinner or something, and somebody asked you, you know, just in a minute or two, where would you start to sort of share with people this rich history? What would you say? What part in history or what particular martyr? Where would you start?
I think a lot of the I think I would start with which is a maybe an obvious starting point, but I think Saint Francis Xavier would be the starting point. I know that the history of Christianity is much older in Asia than Saint Francis Xavier. We had the sort of Church of the East present in China over 1,000 years ago. But I think I would start with Saint Francis Xavier because that was the start of what I would consider the sort of modern mission, Catholic mission in China. and Japan. Um, the thing with Korea is Korea's sort of the initial conversion was very lay driven. So in a sense, it sprouted from those Jesuit efforts initial in China and Japan. But I think I would start with St. Francis Xavier because it's really incredible just how much he accomplished in his short life and how much of foundation he laid for further missions.
What would you say is the state of the Catholic Church today, like in a place like China? You know, we do see a little bit on the news that I guess China has to approve bishops and stuff like that. But what is from your understanding, the health of the church there?
I would say it's a complex matter. The church has to balance simultaneously the sort of staying true to its independence while also balancing the needs of Chinese Catholics. That is something. It's a very controversial matter, and I completely understand a lot of the sides of it, which is why I try to not speak too decisively on it on my account. But the sort of situation essentially is that the government wishes to have control over the church to a certain extent. There's the idea of having the church be patriotic, which in of itself isn't necessarily completely negative, but that comes into conflict sometimes with the interests of the Vatican, in the sense of it's really a very, very old problem in very modern sort of clothing. It is similar to the sort of investiture controversies of the medieval period, where the CCPA, the Patriotic Association, and the government, they want to appoint certain clerics to the position of bishop or prelate, and sometimes that conflicts with what the Vatican wants, and sometimes that is done without the supervision of the Vatican. And so what the 2018 deal was supposed to be was a sort of normalization, a sort of because the truth of the matter is, you know, there is the underground church, there is the CCPA approved church, but it's not like the CCPA approved church is, you know, there's a lot of good, faithful Catholics in that church, a lot of Catholics that do not have to necessarily have any sort of like grievance at all towards the papacy or the Vatican, and the idea of the deal is just to sort of normalize that relation, to give sort of concessions. It's and the question is, are those concessions too much? The question is, can the government be trusted with keeping the bounds of that relationship? And the answer, sort of from what we've seen so far, is sometimes. There have been certain violations, but it's a complicated matter because it's not just political posturing. It's not just, you know, as much as I absolutely have sympathy for the people in the underground church, there are also a lot of Catholics who rely on the state affiliated church for their sacraments and for their sort of religious life.
Yeah, it's definitely very, very complex, and people sometimes will see it and say, "Oh, they shouldn't have done this," and they should. But the Pope and the bishops have a lot of things to consider, and like you're saying, the spiritual well-being of the people being the first and foremost. I put a link to your website, churchinasia.com, in the comments if people want to pop over there. You have some beautiful images that people can download to put on their phone or computer. Some very beautiful images of some churches from East Asia, and lots of great resources here. I was just going to ask, I don't know if you remember seeing this movie or if you did, but there was a movie called Silence that was out about 10 years ago. It was about the Jesuits who went to Japan. I think it was with Andrew Garfield. Do you remember seeing that movie? Or
Yes, I went to see that movie way back when it first came out in theaters. That was before even I really had a strong interest in Catholicism in East Asia. But yes, I did.
I just going to ask you if you had an opinion on it, or if you thought it was a good adaptation, or what your thoughts are.
It was I've not read the original book Silence by Shusaku Endo, but it was a good movie in the sense that it portrayed the sort of the intense suffering that a lot of these Japanese martyrs had to go through, and the sort of I know there's mixed opinions about it in Catholic spheres concerning that, the main character. Maybe this is a little bit of a spoiler, but he does apostatize at the end of the movie, and it's sort of like seemingly Jesus is sort of speaking to him, encouraging him to do that. And I understand those concerns, but nevertheless, I think it isn't a worthwhile portrayal of the difficulty of the mission in Japan, especially in those later stages where the persecution was ramping up. That is something that I've encountered often in my research, and even in just like personal thoughts on the state of the church in East Asia, is just this perpetual sort of trying to sort of the perpetual mission of the church and how much difficulties it encountered in these countries, how many times there was failure, and sometimes, we often say in Catholic spheres and so on, the blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church, and that's definitely true. But sometimes, there isn't great success even after many brave souls give their life for Christ. And that is something that movie really touches upon, is the sort of that we as Catholics have to be prepared for the fact that God works in a very, very long time span, and immediate success is something that we can't really count on. There are cases where we have seen great success in the very early days of the missions, but that movie sort of touches upon that difficulty, upon the difficulty of just introducing the gospel to nations that are very far away, very different from what the apostles encountered. The movie is very beautiful, just like artistically speaking. The visuals are really incredible. And though, yes, I am also sort of conflicted about the ending, that it's sort of ambiguous, but it is a movie that I would say is worth watching. And compared to some other pop culture introductions to the church in Japan, it is probably on the better side.
Yeah, Liam Neeson also in that particular film called Silence. I wanted to ask you about you have a pinned post talking about a book, Two Japanese Christian Heroes. Tell us about that.
Yes, that is a project that sort of spiraled out of its original bounds. I was trying to find a book because sometimes I edit Wikipedia just like in my free time, and I was trying to get to the bottom of whether these circumstances of Hosokawa Gracia's death, to see if it was actually a suicide or not. And so I am very blessed to live in the DC area, which means that I have access to the Library of Congress. And I was looking for a specific book on Hosokawa Gracia, and I couldn't find it there actually at the time. But I did find another book which was about Don Justo Takayama, Blessed Don Justo Takayama and Hosokawa Gracia. And while initially there just to like scan some pages for use for that Wikipedia article and for this account, I started thinking about, this book is out of print. I have access to it. I'm already scanning the book. Maybe I could look into whether the copyright has expired or not, and whether I could republish this book to make it more widely available. And it is a good book. I didn't write it, obviously. It is a very good sort of a little bit more in-depth introduction to these two Catholic figures in the Catholic mission in Japan. And so eventually I did decide to sort of scan the book, correct it for errors, turn it into like a professional document that can be used for printing books. And I did put it out to print. There's multiple mishaps with that. I have a lot of faulty copies at home. But I also decided to put the book on my website for free because it's a book that I didn't write myself. This is a book that I didn't translate myself either. It would be unfair to sort of put a monetary block on that information, especially considering the whole point of this account is to spread information and to spread, awareness about this topic.
I'd like to encourage people, if they'd like to ask a question, you can feel free to request the microphone. I take it that was your first venture into publishing something. Was that end up being a lot harder than you thought it would be?
It was. I wouldn't say it was very hard, but it was very tedious. Just scanning through the book, reading through it multiple times to catch errors, because the character recognition software is still not perfect, which means that it was fairly tedious, but I think worth it in the end, definitely.
I was scanning your feed here. This is very wonderful. You had a post, I think it was yesterday, that this past Sunday, 30 catechumens in Beijing underwent prayer and preparation at a church there. Beautiful, looks like a neo-Gothic church. And we We remember all people that are going through RCIA, or sometimes we're now calling it OCIA, all across the world, in East Asia, but around the world, to keep these people in prayer, because a lot of spiritual attacks come upon catechumens and candidates for full communion in the church. In these final weeks, the devil wants to get people off track, and so we keep everybody in prayer. What's been like the reaction? I noticed that this is interesting. You follow 0 people on X, but you have almost 30,000 followers. That's a pretty amazing number to have in less than 3 years. What kind of feedback do you get? Do you get like direct messages, people asking you questions, or a lot of comments on your posts?
The way that I run this account is sort of sporadic, in the sense that I'm not logged in like 100% of the time. I just usually log in to make my posts, maybe to reply to a few comments, and then log out. So while I do always appreciate comments, I think the best way to reach out to me and like ask a specific question would be DMs, because that is something that it's like ever present. Especially because, you know, with normal Twitter or X notifications, that can get lost very easily. The reason why I don't really follow people is because it's sort of like a matter of impartiality. That I am a person who likes interaction on the internet, and it's sort of to just stick to the content. It's also a matter of like impersonality. I don't really like that much talking about myself, because, you know, the focus is on the content, on the topic.
I love this piece of art. I think it was from a few weeks ago. It's the one of Saint Joseph returning from work to the Holy Family. They're in the snow, and there's a beautiful artistic depiction. It's always beautiful to see these in different cultures represented with the cultural ascetics. Tell us about, I know Pope Francis has really tried to get more cardinals from around the world, and maybe less in the, you know, what they call the West, the industrialized nations, the G8, all that kind of stuff. The U.S. has less cardinals than they've had in the past. And he's gone to the margins, as he calls it, right? I know he's appointed a cardinal from rural Guatemala, for example. What about in East Asia? Has the number of cardinals increased since Pope Francis came to lead the church, or is it about the same?
Yes, there have been certain increases, and even I would say historical increases in the case of I don't keep track of all of the cardinals currently in East Asia, but I know recently is probably maybe not the best word, but like half a year ago, Mongolia got a cardinal, which is pretty significant. So yes, there has been an increase of cardinals being appointed in East Asia, which is, I would say, well, it is a generally good thing to have more representation from that part of the world. But again, it's sort of, I don't want to get into my opinions, but it depends on the bishop that is elevated, whether that is a prudent decision or not.
I certainly understand that. Absolutely. I just posted to the Nest there at the top. This is a Chinese Catholic catechetical lithograph that explains the doctrine of original sin. Again, another very beautiful piece of work that is created to spread the faith. I'm not sure what year. I imagine this has got some, many decades ago. How is the Catholics in that part of the world very dedicated to the Blessed Virgin Mary as they are in other places, or what would you say about that?
I would say so, yes. it is, I feel, a universal. I can't speak from very, very intimate experience, but from what I've seen, yes, there is quite a bit of a devotion to the Virgin Mary. Just judging by um, by the frequency of mention. Again, I'm not very very well educated on that specific topic. The specific devotions, but due to the situation in East Asia, where there is China is a little bit of a different situation, just because with China, you see small percentages of the population being Catholic, but China is very, very, very populous. A sort of similar situation to India, where India only has a small percentage of its population being Catholic, but it still is one of the countries with millions upon millions of Catholics. The situation, from what I've heard from people that I trust in Japan specifically, is that the church there is very small, but it is the laity is very dedicated, in part because of that smallness, it's not the perfect term for it, but like minority status.
Yeah, I think China is like, what, 1.4 billion people or something. And so even if 1% is Catholic, that's going to be more Catholic Christians in China than many European countries, right? Mm-hmm. It's an amazing statistic. I did a thread a while back, maybe last month. I'm sure you might have heard this story, but it's the story of the atomic bomb that was dropped in Hiroshima, and the Jesuit church that survived was about a mile, I think, from the blast site. And there was, 3 or 4 priests there. They all survived and never had radiation sickness. And they attributed it to the fact that they prayed the rosary very faithfully every day. It's a very, very beautiful story in the middle of a tragic, horrible catastrophe. But the church actually, not the roof, but the rest of the structure withstood. But I remember going to, I've actually been to Hiroshima, and a long time ago, I was not Catholic at the time. I was with a friend who was Catholic, and they went off to actually see it, to see, a church or something. And but I remember being surprised that I was unaware that, there were Catholics in Japan or whatever. There's a very beautiful history there. There really is. Like you say, people don't know about for whatever reason. So we're happy to see what you're doing to, and that's why I love following your account, because it's unlike any account. It's unlike any Catholic account I follow. And I follow lots of Catholic accounts, and they're all wonderful and everything. But yours is 100% like unique. I don't see the same things, on the other accounts I follow, I'll see the same images on multiple accounts, and, yours is like so unique. I think it's so wonderful what you're doing here. And I want to encourage people to not just follow you if they're not following you now, but to repost your content and share it and ask questions in the comments. And if you have a big question, like you said, direct message you. But when people comment on things, it helps more people see it, because it's such a beautiful, fascinating history. And we're just so happy to get a chance to talk to you today. I'll give one final call for anybody who wants to request a microphone and say anything. And what about you, Jacob? Are you a cradle Catholic, convert?
Thank you for the kind words. And yeah, I'm a cradle Catholic. Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I encourage people to go to your website, which is churchinasia.com. Like you say, it's a sort of a supplement to the work you're doing here on the X social media platform, but they can get a copy of that book. They can download these beautiful images you have and look at some of the very interesting resources that you have. You have something on global Christian worship. You have a little information on the history of Opus Dei in Japan. You have, that looks interesting, the Japanese Order of the Mass, and a lot of great, great stuff. So I encourage people to take a look at that. So, well, thank you for being here, and I hope we can do this again, every once in a while, and just sort of talk about this so more people can learn about Catholicism in East Asia.
Yeah, definitely. It's been a great honor. I always appreciate an opportunity to talk about this.
You've been listening to a discussion on Catholicism in East Asia on the Catholic Frequency podcast. Be sure to follow us on YouTube and also follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcast. That way you'll be notified every time we release a new episode. And you can check out a lot of resources on our Catholic Frequency website at catholicfrequency.com.